Hello fellow gamers and welcome back. I'm as always Captain Sedaris.
And I'm Seven Saturn.
Joining us today are two special guests. John Hawkins, one of the designer of Rise of Nations.
Hello.
And AJ&C, the administrator of the Rise of Nations Discord.
Hello, happy to be here.
Welcome to our little corner of the internet. I would say let's start with a little introduction round. Who are you guys?
I can go first, I guess. I'm John Hawkins. I'm a game designer. I've worked in the games industry for about 18, 19 years now. Worked on games like Rise of Nations, Dominations, and a bunch of other ones.
And hello, I'm HNZ or HNZ88, and I am the administrator and current owner of the Rise of Nations Discord server, as well as the administrator of the Rise of Nations Steam community group and developer of the Rise of Nations community balance patch.
Okay, thank you guys. Then let's start with the first question for our honored guest. How and when did you get into the gaming industry?
Yeah, so I guess it was never my intention to get into games. It was always, I just was really into playing games a lot. Went to college. I was getting a business degree, actually. But instead of going to class, I spent a lot of time playing Age of Empires online. So I was playing Age of Empires 1, Age of Empires 2. And I got pretty good at both of those games. And I was in one of the kind of like top clans back then. And one day someone messaged us. His name was Brian Reynolds, and he said he wanted to join our clan. And I actually knew who Brian Reynolds was because I'd played a lot of Civilization 2, and I played a lot of Alpha Centauri and saw his name on the load screen there. So he kind of joined our clan and got to know him a little bit. And this was about the time right before he was starting up Big Huge Games to work on Rise of Nations. So he was kind of doing some, I guess, research. So that was kind of my kind of connection to games. When I graduated college, I saw that Big Huge Games was looking for someone who was good at real-time strategy games to come and playtest the game. So contacted them, and kind of having that connection with Brian made it pretty easy to kind of get in there. And after a month or two, I kind of moved into a design position. So that's how I got in.
Working as a designer on this game, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the inspiration for this game.
For Rise of Nations, yeah, I mean, I joined the game probably with only about like 8 or 9 months left, but I do know that Brian and the rest of the team definitely took a lot of inspiration from the Age of Empires series. You know, they'd been working on all those turn-based strategy games, and I think Age of Empires kind of like showed them like, hey, you know, you can make some cool real-time history games here too.
We introduced you as a game designer. What exactly does it mean? I mean, if I hear design as someone who isn't really into the gaming programming sector, I think immediately artwork or something like that, or maybe the technical stuff of the game. What kind of work did you do as a game designer?
Yeah, so I've done a lot of different type of work. I mean, it's hard. It doesn't really mean one thing. I'd say mostly, though, the game designer is responsible for coming up and ensuring that the experience that the player ends up with is fun and fulfilling. That would be the main thing. When I first started out, it was a lot of level design and scripting work. And then from there kind of moved more into like doing like the coming up with the game systems and the content for that, like what type of troops are in the game, like what their powers are, stuff like that. And then there was later on when we were doing Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning, where there was more other things involved, like narrative, like coming up with quests and storylines and things like that. So it's pretty broad, like you're saying, but it's not really just like, oh, just coming up with the ideas, because it's more like you're the kind of collector of ideas and trying to figure out which ones fit and which ones don't to what you're trying to achieve with the game.
Which is actually a good introduction for my next question. The German Wikipedia says that Rise of Nation technically is based on Age of Empires. The software is based on the same game, actually. And what I'm interested in is when the publisher, Microsoft, came to you and said, well, guys, let's make a new game. What exactly was it they were telling you to do? I mean, if I were asking you provocatively, I would ask, was it just make us a little better Age of Empires, or what was the goal of the project in the beginning?
Yeah, well, I mean, I wasn't on the project at the beginning, but as far as I know, like I know of it. Like I think it was mostly just, again, this group of individuals, including Brian Reynolds, had this idea for making a real-time strategy game, you know, that went through all of time. And that's kind of the idea. You know, they built a prototype and took that to Microsoft. And as far as like, you know, every interaction that I've heard of and that we had with Microsoft, it was very good. Like Microsoft was very receptive of the idea. They were very supportive. Like, you know, I felt that was, you know, very good relationship.
So the initial idea was actually from the studio, not the other way around.
Right. Yes. Yes.
If we step back a little bit, the captain already asked you where did your inspiration come from. You already said you played strategy games before. Are there any others that come to mind? I mean, it seems to be mostly strategy games. What other influences do you think went into the game when you were doing the design?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, like definitely like Civilization series and Age of Empires played a large part as kind of being the two kind of big history strategy games out there. Otherwise, I worked a lot on the single player Conquer the World campaign. So, we used a lot of, just reading books about history. Like I still have some of those books about Alexander the Great or Napoleon or, about the Cold War. So, we took a lot of inspiration from books as well, just like, history books, as well as I know we also had quite a collection of like art books of, different, warriors kind of through history. So,
But for the most part, there was always this history setting kind of.
yeah. Horizon Nations, yeah, definitely.
As for the Conquer the World campaigns, the expansion pack Drones and Patriots added quite a number of more specific campaigns, Alexander the Great, Napoleon, Cold War. Were there plans to add them in the original game, or were they thought up after the original game came out?
They were thought up after. So on the original game, we were going to have like a kind of more traditional campaign scenario type structure, like you might see in the Age of Empires. That one wasn't really getting a lot of traction, and there's some people who kind of came up with this like risk map type style, campaign map thing where you're trying to actually conquer the world, and that was kind of only in the last like I don't know. It was definitely within the last like year or 9 months or so of development that even started as an idea. And so that was actually one of the main things that I helped out on, was getting that original Conquer the World campaign together. And so that was all we had time for the first game, for the original game. With the expansion, we had more time. We felt like that was a good place to kind of, innovate a bit more, like, make some interesting story-based campaigns. And it was a lot of fun to work on that stuff, to tell you the truth, just coming up with like taking that original formula, kind of like figuring out different ways to come up with different scenarios, come up with different like powers or, different settings and stuff. It was a lot of fun. And we put out the 4 that went out with Thrones and Patriots, but I know we always are like, there's people at the office who are fooling around with like, oh, I want to make another one or something like that.
Having additional campaigns would be great, but I'm really happy what we got. During our review of Rise of Nations, I just realized how detailed and realistic the gameplay and campaigns are in general. It's an amazing reflection of the real world.
Oh yeah. There are a surprisingly high number of small details where people end up with a specific kind of strategy in a competitive setting, and you realize that this is what people did in real life because that was the most optimal solution against a specific target. And the parallels between competitive gameplay in the present and warfare in the past, it just shows impeccable game design.
Yeah, I will say on the history front, this was a group of people. A lot of them had come from Firaxis and Microprose working on the Civilization series. So they'd had quite a lot of experience working on history games. And then we also had one of the designers was a like kind of historian, like writer. He'd written several, history books about like World War II, I believe, and stuff like that. So there's kind of like these pretty good like history chops there with stuff. And then aside from that, if we ever did stray, like I'd say the fact that Microsoft was our publisher, they kind of helped keep us like on, focused on things if there were ever times where things went like a little awry, so yeah.
Speaking about the team, how many developers worked on this project?
Yeah, I think if I'm remembering correctly, it was about, the total team size was about 20, maybe it could be closer to 30 with like some of the temporary people, but that's about the size of the team.
And would you say there were more specialists or generalists?
It's a good question. I think people there's a little bit of both, I'd say. Like, we had like people who specialized in things. It seems like people could just jump around and do a lot of things at the same time. So I'd say kind of somewhere in between.
The good technical questions are always from Saturn. He has a little bit more experience on the technical side.
Yeah, I'm a technical kind of guy. I'm too in the software industry, but I'm not doing gaming. So I gotta ask the technical questions. the basic game was already present, I take it, from Age of Empires, which was built upon. And what is it written in? Are there any general frameworks you used by the time, or is it all homebrew software enhancing the existing engine? How would a developer have to imagine your kind of work, your kind of progress?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know much about this per se, but it was a brand new engine that they created for this game. As far as it was in C++. Most of how I interacted with it was with the scripting language, which is also based off of C++. So, I don't know if I can really answer too much beyond that.
No, that's just fine. That's okay.
If I'm not mistaken, then Rise of Legends is also created on the same game engine that was originally created for Rise of Nations, correct?
We basically created a new engine, I feel like, for Rise of Legends. I guess most of how I interacted with the code was through the scripting languages, and it's kind of funny because the scripting language on Rise of Nations kind of changed a bit for Thrones and Patriots. It was almost like practically like a new scripting language, and then we did a whole new system again for Rise of Legends. So I'd say no, it was different engines. So.
If I might ask, what specifically changed in Thrones and Patriots? Because from a player's point of view, Thrones and Patriots is very similar to the original game.
You mean in terms of the scripting language?
Yes.
One thing that stands out to me is they added structs to the scripting language, which wasn't in the regular one. And again, I don't remember all the details, but there's some things that the programmer who was on the scripting language wanted to add change for that one. And then there was other things that I guess things we needed for the new campaigns is probably another thing that maybe reason why it could have changed a little bit. But.
Well, speaking of development, of course it takes time, and what I know is the game was released in 2003, and from what you just told us, you started somewhere around 2002 with the development on the game. Do you know when the actual development started?
Yeah, the company was founded in 2000, so sometime in 2000. I don't know exactly, maybe it was the summertime, but I'm not sure. But yeah, around there.
So 3.5 years around about.
Yeah, probably 3 years, probably I'd say, yeah.
And if I remember that correctly, or if I assume it correctly, then by the time Steam wasn't really an issue, I believe. And were you involved during the time when the game was re-released on Steam?
Not really. I know we had talked about doing a Steam version and even done some work towards it, much earlier on. By the time the Steam version came out, the original Big Huge Games had shut down. But I guess I wasn't really involved. I kind of got to meet or talk with some of the people on the Microsoft side who were involved, and I told them if you needed anything, let me know. But I didn't hear anything past that. So.
Well, 3 years sounds like a short time, but of course you already had a good start with the engine, but that doesn't actually tell anyone how difficult the work actually was. Can you give us an idea how difficult certain aspects were, or what was the biggest problem when you guys were doing the development?
Yeah, it was pretty difficult in terms of, we worked quite a lot back in those days. I feel like we were, working very unhealthily, almost living at the office in some ways. I can remember sleeping at the office a lot of nights. I can remember, days that just, started off and just worked the whole day. So that probably was not the most healthy way, but it was fun. It was a lot of fun. Learned a lot from it. Particular things that were challenging, at least in the last year that I was there. I remember replays were always a big problem. Replays seem to just always be a problem on whatever strategy game I've ever worked on. Just getting the game to replay what happened. Multiplayer was also the matchmaking for multiplayer was also I remember being a bit of a challenge. But yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, the system for the replays is that the game literally replays everything that happens during the game, right?
Yes, so it's very easy for that to get kind of out of sync, the code, because you kind of have to keep the code in sync with the replay system, the regular system, or, I don't know a lot about it, but yeah, it's trying to replay it. So if very little, small things that are off can cause big problems in the replay, because, if it didn't know that someone did this one action, then it suddenly changes the whole replay.
I must admit, I never really played on the internet. So when you say matchmaking was kind of difficult, does the game somehow consider a skill value of the players, or how is the matchmaking actually facilitated?
It's probably similar now. I don't know how it works now, but yeah, I was using like an elo system, so it was like giving players a ranking, like a score value, and using that to determine like how they match up and how many points they gain or lose when they fight each other.
I cannot comment either because back in the GameSpy days I didn't play multiplayer either. But in the Steam version, nobody really plays matchmaking. They just set up a lobby and wait for people to come.
The classic way. This is what I meant, because if you compare it to other games which do this, then you would think, well, what's to it? Just open a lobby and wait for it. But it sounded like there was more going on here.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly too, another issue was just the kind of like you could get like out of syncs in multiplayer where you get out of sync with the other people playing, and that was a big issue. I remember too, having to like a lot of time spent against that.
Yeah, out of sync is still something that plagues the community, but usually it's either the internet connection or the servers that are to blame.
Yeah, and it's definitely difficult with a game that's got kind of that peer-to-peer connection. I mean, the simple way to solve it, is having like a server that's running the game, and the players are just kind of sending messages back and forth with that. But yeah, anyways.
Well, speaking of technical issues, from your point of perspective, were the devs happy with the situation when the first release came out, when certain patches came out? I believe the captain was specifically interested in balancing of the game. I mean, I know how it feels sometimes when you think the product isn't ready, but your product manager says, well, release it anyways, we are on time here, and let's keep going. How did you feel back then about the situation?
I remember we were excited when the game got released. I think I do remember maybe there were some patches that had to be done, but people were happy to do them. I think they were just stressed out with making sure that they want people playing the game to be happy, so they didn't like if there were issues that needed to get fixed, but felt like we addressed them. The balance of the game, we had a team of balance testers from Microsoft. Microsoft back then had a lot of RTS balance testers from their work with Age of Empires, and there was another game they did back then, Impossible Creatures. So they had this kind of stable of balance testers. So we got to get them to come, and they were playing the game, and they flew out to the office, once or twice, and tried to help make sure that the game was kind of balanced. And that was also kind of my role, at least when I first started, was helping out there too. I remember, I think it was like the first day I got there, I just tried to see if I could rush and win the game, rush someone in as soon as possible and win. And it was pretty easy to just be able to like crush someone with a rush, and then so that got changed a bit. But we're thinking like fairly happy with the balance. But
I wonder, did you also check the community websites for feedback to kind of balance the game a little bit post-release?
I mean, we also used we would read if there was feedback in the community. I don't remember, it's been so long, what kind of community channels there were back then. Obviously not as many as there are now. We had a community manager, and he kind of keep us on top of things like that too.
Were there any big features that didn't ultimately get added into the game that you would have liked to see?
Not from my perspective. I know there were some people at the office who, at some point there were walls in the game, and there was an artist who said he didn't want to play anymore if there weren't walls in the game. So, I mean, that was obviously a feature he wanted in the game. There was some other features. There was some kind of strategic view where you're kind of further out. You kind of see more of the map, but that didn't make the game. Hard to say if people liked it or not, because from a gameplay perspective, it was pretty neat, but it also meant that you couldn't really see the art, so the artist didn't like that as much. But if there's any big features in the original game, no, I mean, I feel like we did pretty good with it. Felt like we did everything we wanted to do with those games.
The only thing which came up to me is a co-op mod. We met each other on Reddit, that's why I'm mentioning it again.
Sorry. I had on my whiteboard at the office for many years, co-op multiplayer RTS campaign. That's what I really wanted to do. I thought that was the best thing ever. We never got to do that, with Rise of Nations or Rise of Legends, or, that was maybe a hope for Rise of Nations 2. Fortunately, there was like, I guess, Dawn of War 2 and StarCraft 2 had kind of some co-op campaigns. But yeah, that would be a lot of fun. Sorry, yeah, yes. Sorry. I guess I think about it more in the terms of like, yeah, if I was going to do another RTS game like that, I'd really like to have a feature like that. But like in the original Rise of Nations, like, yeah, that seems fine. But yeah.
Yeah, speaking of Rise of Nations 2, do you know what, because that game got scrapped, correct?
Right. Yeah. We did start working on it. We had kind of a prototype going for the battles, and we were starting to think out like, what we would do differently with the campaigns.
I was wondering what kind of stuff that would you have liked to see in Rise of Nations 2? Anything new and exciting, or just Rise of Nations but bigger, better, and bolder?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely, after Rise of Legends, there were some neat mechanics we added in Rise of Legends. So trying to apply some of those to Rise of Nations would be nice. Like if the maps were a bit more interesting, in terms of they had more different points of interest on them. They also kind of they had more randomness to them, so parts of them could kind of change from play to play. There's also just some neat stuff with like the city and district building that I think we could have added into a Rise of Nations 2 from Rise of Legends. And then in the campaigns, I mean, I think we would have tried to make something a little bit with more depth. Like, maybe, I mean, this wasn't a thing back then, I don't think. I don't, but something like a Crusader Kings, like maybe more, not that far in terms of like what you're doing in the campaign, but kind of like the idea that maybe you do have a character or family that you're kind of building up. And I think for us, that was more, the touchdown for us was these old games, Genghis Khan 2, where you kind of had your character and built up your family, but you're conquering the world at the same time. So, I'd probably just want more features on the campaign stuff, maybe more interesting stuff to do. I know with Rise of Legends, you could kind of build up your the different nodes in the campaign a bit after you captured them. So just adding more kind of mechanics into the campaign to make it a little bit more, I guess, more role play, I guess I would say, but also opening up more strategic options.
Speaking of Rise of Legends, it was received very well, like the original game even, but did commercially much worse. Do you know maybe what happened there in the development phase, or maybe after, what changed in the game so much that it wasn't received that good by the community?
Yeah, I mean, like we have our own theories. Like, I think the fantasy, we tried to do something different with the fantasy world in that game, and maybe it was just hard for people to connect with it. It was inspired by a couple different things, with like these steamwork Italian, Da Vinci type inventors, and this like Arabian Nights magical race, and then the the alien influenced human people. But like, I think, maybe if we'd stuck to more traditional fantasy, like maybe could have done better. People could have like hooked onto it better instead of, known more about it. Also, like the RTS market seemed to kind of be cratering a bit. So maybe it was just bad timing. In general, I'd say like the group of people that we've worked together for a long time now, it always seems we do better on history games. When we go to do something else seems to not hit the market as well. Like Alpha Centauri is another one that I would point to that, again, I didn't work on, but they always talk about like critically it was very well received, but commercially it wasn't quite as big a deal. And, like you're saying, some of the Rise of Legends didn't do so well commercially, even though it was critically well received. And, I'd say, many people, like, I know some of the balance testers from the Microsoft, they're like Rise of Legends is the better RTS game than Rise of Nations, but it just didn't really take off.
But if you could go back, would there be anything you would change with that game?
I mean, I think the collective wisdom is that we should have just made Rise of Nations 2 instead of doing the fantasy one. With Rise of Legends specifically, again, trying a different fantasy theme, I guess, would be the main thing. I feel like the mechanics in the main battles were pretty good. I mean, I guess there's stuff with the campaign, like I would probably want to change. Like we kind of, we went off and like trying to make it really different than Rise of Nations at first, and that didn't really work out. So we kind of wasted a lot of time exploring that direction, and we kind of came back to, something that was a lot closer to Rise of Nations. And I think it actually ended up being pretty neat, but the story is not that great. Some of the cutscenes are not so great. So there's some definitely we could have made it a lot better there. And that's I'll reference. Thanks for that. I'll reference your point. But yeah, sure. If we could have done like co-op multiplayer campaign, that would have been cool.
Oh, we love co-op on this channel. There is no project which wouldn't benefit from it.
Unless the ones that have co-op.
Well, they can improve it.
No, it's really repetitive in a way, but it's really spicing up the experience, of course. This is why we are really nagging with this topic.
Talking a little bit about your other projects. Basically, what did you work on?
Yeah, sure. So, bad news was that we didn't get to do Rise of Nations 2. Good news was Microsoft let us work on the Age of Empires 3 Asian Dynasties expansion. And that was a lot of fun. Age of Empires was the series that got me into the industry. So being able to design an expansion pack in that series was a lot of fun. Like we had a lot of time to do that. And I feel like we just really went to town. Like it seems like that one was pretty well received, if I'm remembering correctly. And we just really made like these 3 really cool, like unique nations we added to the game with India, China, Japan. And that was a lot of fun. That was the only project I probably ever worked on where we actually got to the end and we finished the game. Like we finished everything we wanted to do and we were just like, yep, that's it, we're done. So that one was a lot of fun. We also got to, collaborate with Ensemble a bit. And again, since I had, been super into Age of Empires, it was neat to get to meet a lot of people there. And then even some of the balance, I should have mentioned this too, but some of the balance testers from Microsoft, we kind of brought them over to work on Age of Empires. But some of them were people that I kind of knew like from playing Age of Empires with them online. So there's some cool connections there. After that, prototyped some stuff for a bit, but nothing that really got anywhere. And then I worked on Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning, which was the big open world action role-playing game that we did, Big Huge Games did. That one was a lot of fun. It was different. I'd only worked on strategy games up to that point. And I was kind of overseeing the content for that game. So I was, figuring out like the quests, the levels, the world, like, and how all those pieces fit together. And that was a different challenge. I'll be honest, like I have more fun making strategy games, but it was kind of neat to get to do something different for a while. And, that was another game that seemed to be pretty well received and did fairly well commercially, actually. I think there was like some weird, like with the 38 studios that owned Big Huge Games at the time ended up kind of collapsing, but that really had nothing to do with the Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning. That was all with stuff with the MMO they were making. But so anyways, then Big Huge Games shut down for a while. I did work on some mobile games on my own, just some small things and some board games. But then when Big Huge Games kind of came back, I started working with them again and was the lead designer on Dominations, which is, kind of this Clash of Clans style game, but in history, through all of history. So we kind of, similar to how Rise of Nations did with the RTS thing, we kind of did with this reverse tower defense genre. And Dominations is still going strong. It's been out for like 6 years now about, and that was a lot of fun to kind of work in a different space. I mean, obviously like free to play, there's kind of different constraints and stuff, but I feel like we really kind of tried to make something that was fun and interesting and seems to have connected with people. Most recently, the game I worked on was Arcane Showdown, which was for mobile and Steam, but that was another strategy game. The goal with that one was to try to make an RTS that was kind of more modern, because it's like RTS games until recently, I think there's been a lot more interest in RTS games recently, but for a long time they've kind of been dormant and not a lot going on. So it was trying to kind of make something a little bit more approachable and modern. And I feel like that game, like I'm really happy with it. Like I think, I have a lot of fun playing it. I was actually playing it right before this call. That's basically what I've been up to.
Do you play any video games in your personal life?
Yeah, although I will say that if I play games for the last like 10 or 15 years, it's felt like it's either been like for work or with my kids. So like most of what I end up playing, we've been moving mobile games a lot. So, I'd play a lot of the mobile games like Clash Royale or Rise of Kingdoms, Clash of Clans, stuff like that. But then with my kids, I'd end up playing a lot of Fortnite and Minecraft and The Escapist and stuff. So I don't get too much time to play like games that I would have played when I was younger. I mean, I do get to play like Civilization 6. I've played that quite a bit. It's a lot of fun. So occasionally I'll get to do that. I guess I played that Final Fantasy VII remake a bit, but so yeah, mostly it's for work and for the kids, I guess.
Being at the subject of work, if money or resource were not a problem, what would your dream project be? Is there anything which you wanted to do in your life basically but couldn't?
I don't know. I mean, I guess I would think about like, yeah, I mean, it would probably be some historical strategy thing. It'd probably be co-op multiplayer, probably a real-time game. Like I really do enjoy playing real-time strategy games. So probably something in that vein. Like if I was looking at like that Arcane Showdown game we just did, that's a fantasy game. So if we could take some of the mechanics from that, turn it into a history game, maybe, like I said, add the co-op multiplayer campaign. Another part would be, maybe figuring out like kind of a more interesting business model for people who are into that type of stuff. Like, I think there's like a discongruency with like, the people who play on Steam and the types of games that they want to play and the people play on mobile. So trying to maybe focus it something more for something they play on Steam and what makes them happy. So I know it's kind of like not a specific answer, but I'd probably try to make some big through the history game, through the ages game, but with like a lot of fun strategy and, co-op campaign stuff.
Well, guys, if you don't have any questions left...
I have one more question. Did you ever think that Rise of Nations would be as successful as it was? Because, can't deny that Rise of Nations was a very successful game.
Yeah, I think there was, we thought it was cool. I mean, I think, so we had hopes that it would do well. It's still kind of, I would say, like you say, like kind of exceeded expectations. Like, but I mean, I think we had high hopes for it. I guess for me, it's more like I'm impressed that like, with the new version and like people are still talking about it like now, like especially like a lot of these games that I worked on earlier in my career, like it's just impressive to me. This like, Rise of Nations, Age of Empires 3, Kingdoms of Amalur, like all these games like are still relevant. People are still playing them, and it's just like it's heartwarming or something like that. It's nice. It's cool. It's cool to see all the interest in this stuff.
Yeah, because there aren't too many games from that time period that still have tournaments going on this day.
So my last question would be, as a veteran in gaming industry, what advice would you give someone who intends to also start a career in this business?
Well, I always start with, just play games a lot. It's also really helpful maybe to play one game like a lot, so you get to know one game really well. Because if you can kind of like figure out how one game works and think about how you would want to make it better or what's good about it, like it's easy to kind of apply that to other games. And then beyond that, like I'd try to like start making your own games, whether that's like using Unity or Unreal or even just, doing stuff, paper prototyping like board games or something like that. Like, the best, whenever I'm looking at, someone who's applying, like I always want to see like, is there some game they've made that I can play? Like that's the number one thing I want to know. So, that's the top two things. Beyond that, I mean, it's good to learn stuff, like being able to, code or script is pretty useful, and knowing kind of how to like make stuff in game engines is also very useful. Like if you want to learn Unity or Unreal, and then just try to make contacts, try to get your foot in the door anywhere you can,
Okay, I would say this is the part of the video where we open the mic to you guys. Would you like to add anything? Anything we missed? Anything you wanted to mention?
Well, for me, I'm definitely inviting everybody to join the Rise of Nations Discord server and check the game out on Steam. It's still very, very good game. You can still find quite an active community, and there's competitive games going on. There's tournaments being organized. The most recent one, Nomadium 3, is gonna have its first games in probably a few weeks. And yeah, good stuff. And also check out the community balance patch. We're trying to balance the game from where big huge games left off. Pass the torch to the fans.
Of course, all of those links will be in the description. John, anything you want to add?
No, just I appreciate you having me here to chat, and hope everyone continues to enjoy the game. And I'm happy to just, I try to read all the various Reddit or Discords and stuff and just, chime in when I can. But it's really fun just getting to see everyone still playing the game.
We have to say thank you that you join us, and I'm also happy that a developer is taking time to read the community posts and how basically the baby they created is doing so in life.
Yeah, definitely. And like, I mean, that's like, I think I told you, like I played Rise of Nations a couple months back, actually for for research purposes, which is funny. But I didn't want to put it down. It's hard to put down. If I can find some time, probably dive back into it again. It would be neat to, especially like I'm kind of curious to play with real people again. It's been a long time.
Yeah, especially in the campaign modus, the Conquer the World modus. It's really like a civilization match. Just one more turn, just one more, and it's 4 a.m. Damn it.
Definitely.
Okay, I would say that's it for this interview. Leave us a comment, tell us what you think about the game, and of course, play the game. Until next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.